When you visit a beautiful city, you'll probably take some photographs, and most of them will probably be, a bit crap. Which matters, because a year later, or in my case about 5 minutes later, you won't remember a bloody thing about the city you visited. Your only memory will be your photos. So I've just done something called the Urban iPhone Photography course, which claims it'll have me taking beautiful photographs of cities with my iPhone. And I'm off to Prague to see if that's true. It's January, so on the plus side, no tourist queues. On the minus side, that's because it's -7. So I've packed my heated gilet here, and some heated gloves, and I'm just hoping it doesn't rain. It would be such an undignified way to go, electrocuted by my gilet. That's by the by. When I get back, if I get back, you can judge whether this course has helped me come home with better photographs and better memories. Oh, bloody hell. Now that was cold, but I tell you what, it was worth it. Prague is one of the most beautiful cities I think I've ever seen. But before we take a look at the photos, first, a bit about the Urban iPhone Photography course. It's split into 4 modules, each made up of about 15 short videos. They're all about 3 to 10 minutes long, so it's easy to dip in and out of. The course is made by the same people who created the iPhone Photography Academy, which I've reviewed before and genuinely rate. But where that course is more of a foundation in how to take better photographs with an iPhone, this one teaches you more specifically how to take memorable pictures of the cities you visit, instead of coming home with 50 shots of half a dozen landmarks taken from the same angle. The course is presented by Clifford Pickett, a photographer who explains everything enthusiastically without being over the top. As for me, well, I'd describe myself as a very averagely average photographer. I know the basics, the rule of thirds, light, depth of field, that sort of thing, but when travelling, I've tended to just point and shoot. I wanted to see whether this course would improve the quality of the photos I came home with. So let's take a look at them. Actually, before we do, I think I felt one of the greatest benefits of this course before I even pulled my iPhone out of my pocket, which was that it made me so much more observant. That's because the whole course is really about seeing, how to see a city instead of just pointing your phone at things. So from the moment I stepped out of the hotel, I had Clifford sitting on my shoulder telling me to look out for interesting lighting, geometry, reflections, leading lines, and so on. And I found that as I was doing that, I was just taking in so much more about the city around me. And that alone is worth the money I spent on the course. As to my photos, well, I'll let you be the judge. Learning anything is a journey, and let's just say I still have a long way to travel. That said, there are a few in here I was quite pleased with. If you like them, well, do the course and you'll be able to take your own. I'll put a link in the description below. So now let's head off to Prague. First lesson, find a decent vantage point, which meant climbing 287 steps up St. Vitus Cathedral and praying there'd be a defibrillator at the top. Oh, hell of a climb, but boy, it was worth it. Turns out Prague is peppered with towers, so there was no shortage of places to haul myself up. But the course isn't just about finding a high spot and pointing your phone vaguely at Europe. Very quickly, it had me looking for ways to frame things. Arches, doorways, windows, anything that makes a photo feel like you were standing there, rather than just photographing a building because it exists. And once you start looking for these things, it does become strangely addictive. Next, I found myself looking for reflections because they add depth and interest without much effort. Looking for leading lines, so the viewer's eye gets drawn into the picture instead of drifting off. Looking for symmetry, which is oddly satisfying even when you can't quite explain why. Looking for layers, foreground, middle, background, so the scene doesn't feel flat. looking for shapes, curves, rectangles, patterns, and sometimes, when colour wasn't really adding anything, switching to black and white. Because once you remove colour, all that's left is light, shadow, and shape. And then there's text, because words always pull attention. Now that's my kind of wine bar. Then there was golden hour and blue hour. In theory, buildings are bathed in a beautiful golden light just after sunrise and just before sunset. And just before sunrise and after sunset, you can capture an incredibly rich blue sky. In reality, in January, it's mostly grey hour. But even grey can work. There was something really rather wonderful about being on the Charles Bridge at dawn when the tourists are still horizontal and the street lamps are still on. That short window when the sky is lifting but the city hasn't quite woken up. The course also covers street photography of people, either with their permission, which can look a little bit staged, or surreptitiously, holding the phone down by your side and shooting as you pass someone in the street. Problem was, I couldn't get the burst mode working, and I couldn't time it right either. So I wound up with an extensive portfolio of pictures of body parts. But to be honest, I was never that comfortable with the idea in the first place. It's a very fine line between surreptitious street photographer and a man who has quite a lot of explaining to do. There's a lot more in this course than I've shown here. Editing, artificial depth of field, long exposures for silky water and light trails, and the whole idea of hunting versus fishing for a shot. But I was in Prague with my wife, and let's just say that her tolerance for standing around in -5 degrees waiting for me to capture the perfect shot is not what you would call infinite. So some of that will have to wait for another trip. One thing the course really made me think about, though, was the difference between a snap and something a bit more considered. This photo, for example, is not remotely artistic, but it is exactly as I saw it. These, on the other hand, are more deliberate, better composed, cropped, edited, nicer to look at, possibly better photographs, but perhaps less accurate as memories. I think there's room for both, and if you can take your everyday snaps and make them just a bit more intentional, then when you look back at them, you're not just reminded of the place, you're reminded of how it felt to be there. Above all, though, as I said earlier, this course teaches you as much about how to see things as it does to photograph them, and that's priceless. If you're interested in doing the Urban iPhone Photography course or the more general iPhone Photography Academy, there are links to both below. If you use the links, it helps support the channel and could help towards a portable defibrillator for my next trip.